It all started with the heat, one of those suffocating August Saturdays in the Midwest, where the air is so thick with humidity, it feels like you're breathing soup. I remember the cicadas were buzzing so loud it was like a constant, high-pitched electrical current running through the neighborhood. I'd just gotten home from my weekly golf game with a couple of guys from town, a pathetic attempt to feel normal, to fit into the skin of David Talbot, antique furniture restorer, husband, man. My polo shirt was sticking to my back, and all I wanted was a cold shower and a colder beer. I walked in through the garage, dropping my clubs with a clatter that seemed to echo in the still, hot air of the house. The air conditioning was humming, but it was losing the battle against the sun beating down on our little two-story colonial. "Sarah," I called out, "I'm home!" Silence. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Usually, she'd call back from the kitchen or the living room, maybe ask if I wanted a sandwich. But there was nothing, just the drone of the AC. I walked through the laundry room into the kitchen. A glass of iced tea sat on the counter, a little puddle of condensation at its base. Her car keys were on the hook by the door. She was here. A knot of unease, cold and tight, started to form in my stomach. I'd been living with a secret for so long that any deviation from our normal routine felt like a potential earthquake. Every unexpected silence, every lingering look, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my veins. For 5 years, I had cultivated a life of quiet predictability with Sarah, and my secret life, the one lived in silence and shadows, depended on that predictability. I went upstairs, my golf shoes soft on the carpeted steps. Our bedroom was empty, the bed neatly made. I checked her little office nook. The bathroom. Nothing. The only place left was the attic. A feeling of pure, unadulterated dread washed over me. The attic was my place. It was where I stored my tools, my reclaimed lumber, my half-finished projects, and it was where I kept the trunk. The pull-down ladder was already down, a gaping dark square in the ceiling of the hallway. Light from the single bare bulb in the attic spilled out, looking weak and yellow. I could hear a faint rustling sound from up there. "Sarah," I said again, my voice barely a whisper. "Up here, David." She called down. Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. That was worse than anger. So much worse. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands felt cold and clammy. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get in my car and just drive until the country ran out of road. But this was Sarah. This was our home. I put one foot on the ladder and began to climb, each rung a step closer to the gallows. The heat hit me first. It was at least 120 degrees up there, the air thick with the smell of old wood, dust, and something else, my secrets. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I saw her. She was sitting on a small wooden stool in the middle of the attic, next to the old steamer trunk I'd inherited from my grandfather. The trunk I had so carefully, so lovingly restored, the trunk that held the other me. The lid was open, and strewn across the dusty floorboards around her, like a vibrant, horrifying flower that had just bloomed, was my collection, a cascade of satin and lace, a cream-colored nightgown, a pair of black silk panties with delicate red bows, a formidable-looking 42D bra, its cups still perfectly shaped. There were nylon stockings, a garter belt with 6 intimidating straps, a pair of red patent leather high heels, and sitting there, obscenely pale and lifelike in the gloom, my silicone breast forms. I froze on the top step of the ladder, my hand gripping the wooden frame so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to shrink down to this one awful, suffocating space. Her back was to me, but I could feel the weight of her stillness. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She was just sitting. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The buzzing of the cicadas outside faded into a dull roar in my ears. I saw my whole life, the careful construction of David Talbot, crumbling into dust right before my eyes. All the lies, all the sneaking around, all the carefully managed excuses for late nights in my workshop. It was all laid bare on the floor of our attic. Finally, after what felt like an eternity. She spoke, her voice still unnervingly calm. I was just looking for the old Christmas decorations. I didn't say anything. What could I say? The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The silky feminine things looked so alien, so wrong, scattered on the rough wooden floor next to my saws and chisels. She slowly turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes, usually so warm and full of life, were like chips of cold blue stone. There was no anger there, not yet. There was something else, something I couldn't quite read. A deep, profound disappointment. Maybe, but also a flicker of something sharp and calculating. How long? David, she asked. My throat was dry. I tried to swallow, but it felt like I had a mouthful of cotton. A while. I managed to croak. A while, she repeated, the words hanging in the thick, hot air. She picked up one of the breast forms, weighing it in her palm. The silicone jiggled slightly. They feel real. I flinched as if she had struck me. Seeing her hold it, so clinically, so detached, was more violating than if she had screamed at me for hours. It's not what you think, I stammered. The oldest, weakest lie in the book. She let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. Isn't it, then what is it? David, a hobby. Are you restoring these days? Too. Bringing some old lingerie back to its former glory. She stood up and walked towards me. Holding the silicone breast form, I instinctively took a step back. Nearly losing my balance on the ladder, she stopped right in front of me, so close. I could see the tiny beads of sweat on her upper lip. I've been your wife for 10 years, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. I sleep next to you every night. I wash your clothes. I know the man I married, or at least, I thought I did. Who are you? The question hung there, unanswered, because I didn't have an answer. For years, I had existed as two people. David, the quiet, dependable husband who could fix anything made of wood. And the other one, the secret one, who only came out late at night when Sarah was asleep, the one who craved the feel of silk against his skin and the transformative power of becoming someone else. She didn't wait for my answer. She looked from my face down to the floor, at the colorful pile of fabric and plastic and leather. A plan was forming behind her eyes. I could see it. The coldness was being replaced by a kind of focused intensity that scared me more than any rage. You know, she said, her voice suddenly conversational, as if we were discussing what to have for dinner. I've always thought you had such nice hands. Delicate, for a man who works with his hands all day. She reached out and took my right hand. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. She turned it over, tracing the lines on my palm with her finger. You've been hiding this from me. Living this whole other life in my house. Under my roof. She finally looked back up at me, and her eyes were glittering. I think that deserves a punishment. Don't you? The word punishment sent a strange, terrifying thrill through me. It was a word I had read in stories online. A word that belonged to a world I had only ever fantasized about. To hear it from my wife's lips, in the suffocating heat of our attic, surrounded by the evidence of my secret life, made it feel terrifyingly real. I'm sorry. Sarah, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Oh, I know you are, she said, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. It was a smile I had never seen before. You're going to be very, very sorry. She let go of my hand and turned back to the pile of clothes. She picked up the cream-colored satin nightgown and held it up against my body, eyeing me critically, as if measuring me. We're going to get you properly dressed, she said, and then, we're going to talk about your chores. The week that followed was the strangest and most terrifying of my life. Sarah didn't mention the attic again. Not once. She acted as if nothing had happened. She packed up my feminine things and put the trunk back in the corner, and we went back to our lives. But everything was different. The silence in the house was no longer comfortable. It was heavy, laden with unspoken things. I watched her, trying to decipher her mood, looking for a sign of what was to come. She was a master of control. She'd go about her day, working her part-time job at the local grocery store, tending to her garden, cooking dinner. But there was a new edge to her, a watchfulness that never let up. I felt like a bug under a microscope. I'd be in my workshop, trying to focus on the delicate task of French polishing a vintage writing desk, and I'd feel her presence in the doorway. I wouldn't even have to look up. The air would just change. I'd glance over, and she'd be standing there, leaning against the frame, just watching me. She'd observe the way I held my tools, the way I bent over the wood, the way I wiped the sweat from my brow. Her expression was always the same, neutral, appraising, and utterly unreadable. She started making little comments, so subtle that anyone else would have missed them. We'd be watching TV, and a commercial for women's razors would come on. "Their legs always look so smooth, don't they?" she'd muse, not looking at me. Or I'd be struggling to open a stubborn jar of pickles, and she'd take it from me, her grip surprisingly strong, and twist the lid off with ease. "Sometimes you just need a lighter touch," she'd say, with that same little smile. Each comment was a tiny, sharp jab, a reminder of what she knew and what I had become in her eyes: weak, deceitful, a man playing at being a woman. My shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. I found myself becoming more timid, more hesitant. I'd catch myself lowering my voice when I spoke to her, avoiding her gaze. The power dynamic in our house, once a comfortable equilibrium, had shifted so completely it was like the floor had tilted under my feet. I was constantly off balance, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I knew it would drop. Sarah was not the type to let something like this go. She was methodical. She was a planner. She was preparing for something, and the anticipation was eating me alive. One afternoon, I came into the kitchen to find her unpacking groceries. Among the milk, bread, and vegetables were two small, elegant-looking shopping bags from a high-end shoe store downtown. A store I knew I could never afford to shop in. "Did you get something nice?" I asked, trying to sound casual, my voice cracking slightly. She pulled a shoebox out of one of the bags. It was a sleek, glossy black. She opened it and lifted out a shoe. It was a high heel, a towering 5-inch stiletto. The color was a pale, creamy nude, and it had a brutally thin strap that was meant to buckle around the ankle. It was terrifyingly beautiful. "I thought these were lovely," she said, holding it up. The light from the kitchen window gleamed on the polished heel. "They're for a project I'm working on." My blood ran cold. She knew my size. It must have been on one of the boxes in the trunk. She had seen it, remembered it, and gone out and bought these instruments of torture. She placed the shoe carefully back in its box, from the other bag. She pulled out a long, thin black leather belt. It wasn't the kind of belt a man would wear. It was narrow, delicate, with a small, vicious-looking silver buckle. She held the two items in her hands, the towering heel and the thin leather strap, and for the first time, I saw a genuine emotion on her face. It was a strange cocktail of curiosity and a thrilling sense of power. She felt in control, completely and utterly, and in that moment, I knew that my punishment wasn't going to be a quick, angry outburst. It was going to be a slow, deliberate, and humiliating transformation. In the reflection of the toaster, I saw my own face, pale and frightened, but underneath the fear, deep down in the secret, shameful part of my soul that had bought the clothes in the first place, there was something else, a tiny, treacherous flicker of anticipation. It was a feeling so perverse and so wrong that it made me hate myself even more. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, stiff as a board, listening to the sound of her even breathing beside me. I was acutely aware of her body, of the heat radiating from her, for the first time in our marriage. I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger, a beautiful, unpredictable, and dangerous stranger who held my entire world in the palm of her hand. The next day was Saturday again, exactly 1 week since she'd found the trunk. The symmetry was not lost on me. It felt like an anniversary, the anniversary of the end of my life as I knew it. I spent the morning in my workshop, sanding a set of chair legs, my hands moving automatically, my mind a whirlwind of anxiety. I kept waiting for her to call me, to summon me. The waiting was the worst part. Around 2 o'clock, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She'd been out running errands. I heard the front door open and close, the rustle of shopping bags. I stayed in the workshop, my sanctuary, but it no longer felt safe. It felt like a cage I was waiting in. A few minutes later, her voice cut through the quiet hum of the workshop. "David, come upstairs." It wasn't a request, it was a command. My tools clattered onto the workbench from my nerveless fingers. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans and walked out of the workshop, through the cool, quiet house, and up the stairs. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. I walked into our bedroom, and my breath caught in my throat. She had laid them all out on the bed. My things, the satin, the lace, the silk, they were arranged not in a chaotic pile, as they had been in the attic, but with a strange, almost artistic precision. The black lingerie set was in the center, flanked by the cream nightgown and a simple pink day dress I'd bought on a whim, but had never had the courage to wear. At the foot of the bed, placed side by side as if in a shop display, were the new nude heels she had bought. Next to them was the thin black belt. Sarah was standing by the window, her arms crossed, watching me. She was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a t-shirt, but she seemed to tower over me. The afternoon sun backlit her, making it hard to see her expression, but I could feel the intensity of her gaze. "I believe these are yours," she said, her voice cool and even. I stood there in the doorway, paralyzed, my face burning with a shame so profound it felt like a physical illness. My throat was so tight I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod. A tiny, pathetic little jerk of my head. "You tried to lie to me," she said, taking a step toward me. "In the attic. You said it wasn't what I thought. You said you were just curious." I am," I stammered. "It was just trying things on. In private, it didn't mean anything." "Oh, I think it means a great deal," she said, circling the bed, her fingers trailing lightly over the silk of the nightgown. "It means my husband, the man I thought was a man, has a secret desire to wear women's clothing. It means he's been dressing up like a girl in my house, behind my back." Her words were like blows, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy. She stopped in front of me again. "So, since you're so curious," she said, her voice dropping to that low, dangerous tone I was coming to dread, "I've decided to help you. We're going to indulge your curiosity. Fully. No more hiding in the attic." She picked up a pair of silky, black panties from the bed. They were tiny, mostly made of lace and thin straps. She held them out to me. "Take off your clothes," she ordered, "all of them." My mind screamed in protest. This was happening too fast. This was a nightmare. I wanted to run, to yell, to tell her no, but I was frozen. The look in her eyes held me captive. It was a mixture of righteous anger, cold determination, and that same strange, thrilling sense of power I had seen in the kitchen. She was enjoying this. She was enjoying my humiliation, my fear. The realization was both terrifying and, in a way that sickened me, oddly electrifying. Slowly, my hands trembling so badly I could barely manage the buttons, I started to unbutton my shirt. My fingers felt clumsy and useless. I pulled it off and let it drop to the floor. Then my jeans, my socks, my underwear. I stood before her completely naked, exposed, my body feeling pale and wrong under her clinical gaze. I tried to cover myself with my hands, but she just clicked her tongue. "Hands at your sides." "David," she said softly. I obeyed. I stood there, utterly vulnerable, as she looked me up and down, her eyes missing nothing. Her gaze was not one of desire, but of assessment. She was taking inventory of the body she was about to remake. "Let's start with the basics," she said, holding out the panties again. "Put these on." The next hour was a systematic dismantling of David Talbot. It was a slow, deliberate process, and Sarah was the architect of my destruction, or perhaps, my creation. I took the black lace panties from her hand. The fabric felt impossibly flimsy and delicate against my calloused fingers. Turning my back to her, a useless gesture of preserving some last shred of dignity, I stepped into them. The lace was scratchy against my skin. I pulled them up, and the sensation was immediate and shocking. The tight elastic bit into my waist and hips, and the front panel was designed for a body I did not have. It was constricting, forcing me into a new and profoundly uncomfortable awareness of my own anatomy. Everything felt wrong, bundled and pushed into a space it wasn't meant to occupy. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. "Turn around," she commanded. I did, my eyes fixed on the floor. I couldn't bear to look at her. "Next," she said, her voice businesslike. She picked up the bra. It was a black, underwired contraption with lace-trimmed cups. A 42D, a size I had chosen aspirationally on my, imagining a fullness I could never possess. Now, in the harsh light of day, it just looked absurd. Arms up. I raised my arms like a child being dressed. She came behind me and wrapped the band around my chest. It was tight, the elastic digging into my ribs. She fumbled with the hooks and eyes for a moment, her fingers surprisingly cool against my back. Before they clicked into place, the band squeezed me, making it feel slightly harder to take a full breath. The underwires pressed into my sternum and under my arms. The empty lace cups gaped away from my flat, hairy chest, a pathetic mockery of a female form. "Now for the best part," she murmured, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She picked up the silicone breast forms. They were heavy, cool to the touch. I had only ever handled them in the secrecy of night, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Seeing them in her hands, about to be placed on my body by her, was an entirely different experience. It felt clinical, surgical. She came to stand in front of me. "Lean forward a bit." I complied, my body moving on instinct. She took one of the forms and slid it into the left cup of the bra. The cold, heavy weight settled against my chest. It was a strange alien sensation. It felt both foreign and, in a deeply unsettling way, correct. Then she did the other one. The sudden weight on my chest was significant. It pulled the bra straps tight against my shoulders and shifted my center of gravity. I instinctively straightened up, my posture changing to accommodate the new additions. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "That's better. A bit of shape." I chanced to look down, through the black lace of the bra. I could see the pale, fleshy mounds of the silicone. They looked bizarrely real. They moved slightly as I breathed. My body was no longer my own. It was becoming a strange hybrid, a canvas on which she was painting. Next came the garter belt. She instructed me to lie on the bed. As I did. The weight of the breasts felt even more pronounced. She buckled the garter belt around my waist, just above the lace of the panties. Then she took one of the black nylon stockings. The material was sheer and cool. She gathered it up in her hands and started to slide it onto my foot, her touch methodical. She rolled it carefully up my leg, over my calf, over my knee, all the way up my thigh. The sensation of the slick nylon encasing my leg, compressing the muscles, was intensely sensitizing. Every nerve ending seemed to be on fire. She attached the stocking to the garter belt with the little rubber and metal clips, pulling it taut. Then she repeated the process on the other leg. The feeling of the stockings and garter belt was a complex mix of sensations. The soft constriction on my thighs, the slight pull from the garters with every movement, the awareness of the bare skin between the top of the stockings and the bottom of my panties. It was an architecture of femininity, and I was now its unwilling inhabitant. "Now the dress," she said. She chose the simple pink cotton day dress. It was sleeveless with a modest scoop neck and a full skirt that fell to just below the knee. It was the least intimidating piece I owned. Yet, putting it on felt like a final surrender. She held it open for me, and I slipped my arms through. She pulled it down over my head. The fabric settled over my new, artificial curves. It covered the alien landscape of lace and silicone, hiding the mechanics of my transformation and presenting a deceptively simple female silhouette. The skirt swished around my legs as I stood up. For the first time, I couldn't see my own body. I saw only the shape of the dress. Finally, there were the shoes, the new ones, the 5-inch nude stilettos. She knelt before me, a gesture that would have once seemed loving or subservient, but now felt like a blacksmith fitting shackles. She took my left foot and slid it into the shoe. My foot, used to flat work boots and golf shoes, was forced into an unnatural arch. My toes were crammed into the pointed toe box. She pulled the thin strap tight around my ankle and buckled it. The click of the buckle sounded like a cell door locking. Then the other one. "Stand up," she said, rising to her feet. I tried. I pushed myself up from the bed, and my entire body pitched forward. I flailed my arms, pinwheeling for a moment before catching my balance. The world was 5 inches higher and tilted at a terrifying angle. My entire body weight was concentrated on the balls of my feet and my squeezed toes. My ankles wobbled violently, threatening to give way at any moment. The muscles in my calves, thighs, and back screamed in protest as they struggled to adapt to this new precarious posture. "Walk to the mirror," she ordered. The full-length mirror was across the room, maybe 15 feet away. It might as well have been a mile. I took a hesitant first step. My ankle buckled, and I had to put a hand on the bed to steady myself. The movement felt clumsy, grotesque. Each step was a desperate calculation, a battle to keep from toppling over. The high heels clicked loudly on the hardwood floor, an unnatural sound coming from me. The swish of the skirt, the pull of the garters, the weight on my chest, the crippling pain in my feet. It was a total sensory overload. By the time I reached the mirror, I was breathing heavily, a fine sheen of sweat on my forehead. And then I saw myself. It wasn't me. The person in the mirror was a stranger, a tall, awkward, and frankly ridiculous-looking woman. A man's face, with its rough skin and 5 o'clock shadow, sat atop a body, clad in a pink dress. The shoulders were too broad, the hands too large. But the shape, the dress and the breasts created a silhouette that was undeniably female. The shoes forced my legs into a curve. My rear pushed out slightly. I saw the shame, the fear, and the confusion in my own eyes. And beneath it all, that same treacherous, terrifying flicker of something else. The stranger in the mirror was a creature of humiliation, but also of a strange, forbidden beauty. And it was me. I looked at Sarah's reflection in the mirror behind me. She was watching me, her expression intense and proprietary. She had done this. She had made this person. "For the first time," she said softly, her voice right behind my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "I feel like I'm seeing the real you." David. The first phase of my punishment was domestic. Sarah decided that if I was going to be dressed as a woman, I would take on a woman's work. My workshop was declared off-limits. The world of wood, polish, and sawdust was part of David's life. And David, for all intents and purposes, was being systematically erased. The first challenge was simply moving. Navigating our own home in those 5-inch heels was a Herculean task. The plush carpet of the living room was like quicksand, threatening to swallow a heel with every step. The smooth tile of the kitchen was a death trap, slick and unforgiving. I spent the first few hours lurching from one piece of furniture to another, my hands outstretched for balance like a toddler learning to walk. My ankles ached, my calves burned, and a deep, throbbing pain was setting up a permanent residence in the balls of my feet. My first task was to make dinner. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, sipping a glass of wine, and watched me. It was like a cooking show from hell. "We'll have the chicken piccata," she announced, as if she were a queen ordering from her staff. I stumbled to the refrigerator, my movements clumsy and exaggerated. Bending down to get the chicken was a logistical nightmare. I had to brace one hand against the counter, bend my knees deeply, and try to keep my balance as the weight of the silicone breasts pulled me forward. The skirt of the pink dress rode up my thighs, exposing the tops of my stockings and the garter clips, a fact of which I was humiliatingly aware under her watchful gaze. Everything was harder. Slicing lemons, pounding the chicken breasts flat, dredging them in flour, simple tasks I could do with my eyes closed were now fraught with difficulty. My hands, accustomed to the heft of a hammer or the fine control of a chisel, felt huge and clumsy handling the delicate kitchen utensils. I dropped a fork, and it clattered loudly on the tile floor. Bending to retrieve it was another agonizing, revealing ordeal. "Be more graceful," Sarah commented, swirling the wine in her glass. "A lady doesn't just collapse to pick something up, she squats elegantly." I tried to follow her instruction, attempting a slow, controlled squat. My knees protested, my ankles wobbled, and I nearly fell over. I ended up on my hands and knees, scrambling for the fork like an animal, the humiliating swish of my skirt echoing in the quiet kitchen. When it was time to pan-fry the chicken, I stood at the stove, and a drop of hot oil spat from the pan. Landing on my forearm, I yelped and jumped back, nearly tripping over my own feet. Sarah sighed, "You're so clumsy, and try to be more composed." Composed. I felt like I was being disassembled piece by piece. My body was a prison of awkward angles and aching muscles. The constant physical discomfort was a powerful tool. It kept me off balance, not just physically, but mentally. It was impossible to think clearly, to formulate any kind of resistance, when every ounce of my concentration was focused on the simple act of standing upright. After I had clumsily served the meal, my own plate remaining largely untouched because the idea of eating while so constricted felt impossible, she gave me my next task, washing the dishes. Standing at the sink, the hot water steaming up around me, was a unique form of torture. I had to lean forward slightly to reach the faucet, which put even more pressure on my already screaming feet. The hem of my dress got damp. I could feel the weight of my false breasts pressing against the edge of the sink. I scrubbed at the plates with a soapy sponge, my movements stiff and unnatural, while Sarah sat at the table, reading a magazine, occasionally glancing up to check on my progress. The domesticity of it was suffocating. I, David Talbot, who could rebuild a 200-year-old armoire from splinters, was being defeated by a dinner plate. The night didn't bring any relief. She made me sleep in the cream-colored satin nightgown. The bra and breasts came off. A moment of profound physical relief that was immediately replaced by the psychological weirdness of seeing my own hairy chest emerge from its feminine prison. The nightgown was slinky and cool against my skin. It tangled around my legs when I tried to turn over. I felt utterly desexualized, like a neutered pet being forced into a ridiculous costume, lying next to Sarah. I had never felt more distant from her. There was a chasm between us now, and she was the one who had dug it. The next morning, the punishment escalated. After a breakfast, I was forced to prepare and serve. She looked out the window at the lawn, which was getting shaggy. "The yard needs mowing." "David," she said. A wave of relief washed over me. Mowing the lawn, that was my territory, a man's job. It meant work boots, jeans, sweat. It meant being outside, using a loud machine, reclaiming some small piece of my masculinity. "Of course," I said, maybe a little too eagerly. "I'll get right on it." I started to head for the stairs, planning to tear off the ridiculous pink dress and get back into my own clothes. She said, stopping me with her voice. Where do you think you're going? To change. She smiled that cold, controlled smile. Oh, no, you're not changing. But the dress isn't very practical for yard work, is it? She left the room and returned a minute later with something in her hand. It was one of her old bikinis, a simple, black two-piece. The top was a triangle style with string ties, and the bottom was a standard brief cut. My stomach dropped. Sarah, no, please. You don't want to get the pretty dress dirty, do you? She said, her voice light and teasing. Go on, put it on, but keep the shoes. The shoes I can't mow the lawn in high heels. The protest was weak, pathetic. I already knew it was useless. You'll manage, she said. Consider it a lesson in balance. Stripped of the dress and redressed in the flimsy bikini in our sunlit bedroom felt like the ultimate degradation. The string top barely covered the silicone breasts, and tying the knot behind my back was a struggle. The bottoms were even worse than the panties, tighter and more revealing. I was a grotesque parody of a pin-up model, a hairy, muscular man with fake breasts, stuffed into a tiny woman's bathing suit, and on my feet, the nude 5-inch stilettos. She marched me to the garage. The walk across the concrete floor was agony. She swung open the door to the backyard, and the bright morning sun hit me. I flinched, instinctively trying to cover my nearly naked body. No hiding, she said, pulling my hands away. You have a job to do. The lawn seemed vast, a green sea of humiliation. Our yard was bordered by a fence. But the back of our house was visible to the neighbors on the second floor of their homes. Anyone looking out their bedroom window would see me. Sarah pulled the lawnmower out. It was a standard gas-powered push mower, heavy, loud, and built for someone wearing sturdy shoes. Get to it, she said, and then she went back inside. But I knew she was watching. She went to the kitchen window, the one that overlooked the whole yard, and stood there, arms crossed, my audience of one. I took a deep breath and grabbed the mower's handle. The moment I put my weight on it to start pushing, my heels sank straight into the soft turf. The ground, which had always been a firm, reliable surface, was now a treacherous enemy. I was pinned in place. I had to pull my foot out of the lawn, leaving a perfect, deep hole. I tried again, this time trying to stay on the balls of my feet, putting no weight on the heels. It was like an insane ballet. My calf muscles, already burning from the day before, were now screaming in agony. I managed a few stumbling, lurching steps before the mower hit a slight bump, and I lost my balance completely, tumbling sideways into the grass. The fall was clumsy and graceless. I landed on my hip, the fake breasts flopping weirdly. The rough blades of grass scratched my skin, lying there, exposed to the sky in a bikini and heels, with the smell of gasoline and cut grass in my nostrils. I hit a new bottom. Humiliation was no longer a sharp sting. It was a vast ocean, and I was drowning in it. I pushed myself up, my body trembling with exertion and shame. I would not give up. I don't know why. Maybe some last, stubborn shred of pride demanded that I complete the task. I started again. I developed a new technique. A strange, stuttering shuffle, keeping my weight forward. My back bent at an awkward angle. It was brutally hard work. The sun beat down on my exposed back and shoulders. Sweat dripped down my face and chest, pooling in the cleavage created by the silicone forms. My legs shook uncontrollably. With every pass across the lawn, the got heels sank into the earth, aerating the lawn in a pattern of feminine destruction. I became intensely aware of my body in a way I never had been before. I could feel the wobble of the fake breasts with every jolt of the mower. I could feel the sun on my bare stomach. I felt the tight fabric of the bikini bottoms cutting into me. This wasn't just about being dressed as a woman. It was about being forced to perform a masculine task in the most inefficient, feminized way possible. It was a perfect, diabolical punishment. I focused on the noise of the engine, the smell of the grass, anything to distract me from the burning in my legs and the crushing weight of my shame. I worked for what felt like hours, pushing the heavy machine back and forth, leaving a trail of neatly cut grass and deep, round holes in my wake. By the time I finished, I was exhausted, dehydrated, and covered in a mixture of sweat and grass clippings. My entire body was a single, throbbing ache. I stumbled back to the garage and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. I leaned against the garage wall, breathing heavily, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. Sarah came out of the house. She was holding a tall glass of lemonade. She walked over to me, a look of cool appraisal on her face. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing with her chin to a small patch near the rose bushes. I looked at the patch, then back at her. I didn't have an ounce of energy left to fight. I just nodded, my head hung in defeat. "It can wait," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. She handed me the glass of lemonade. Our fingers brushed, and I flinched. The glass was cold and sweating, and it felt like the most wonderful thing I had ever touched. I drank it down in 3 long gulps, the cold, sweet liquid a balm to my parched throat. "You see? David," she said, watching me. "It's not so much about being a woman, it's about learning your place." She took the empty glass from my hand and led me back into the house, back into the air conditioning. My muddy, grass-stained heels clicked on the clean kitchen floor, leaving a trail of dirt behind me. And for the first time, I didn't care about the mess. I was too broken to care about anything. The punishment was working. The lawn mowing incident was a turning point. It had broken something in me. The stubborn masculine pride that had been fighting a silent, losing battle was gone, replaced by a weary, hollow resignation. Sarah seemed to sense this shift. Her methods changed. The punishment became less about raw physical humiliation and more about a deliberate, meticulous process of feminization. It was no longer just about forcing me into clothes. It was about teaching me how to inhabit them. "If you're going to be curious," she said one evening, as I sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, still in the pink dress, "you might as well learn to do it properly. No more sloppy half measures." Our evenings transformed into lessons. She became my teacher, my drill sergeant of femininity. She started with my posture. She would tap my back with a ruler if I slouched, shoulders back. Prudence. A lady does not slump. The first time she used that name, Prudence, it sent a jolt through me. It was an old-fashioned, severe-sounding name. The name of a governess or a librarian. It was utterly devoid of sensuality, a name that suggested propriety, control, and a complete lack of frivolity. It was perfect. "Who is Prudence?" I asked, my voice small. "She's you." Sarah replied simply. "David mows the lawn. Prudence learns how to sit." She taught me how to sit knees together, ankles crossed, hands resting delicately in my lap. She taught me how to stand weight on one foot, hip slightly jutted out, a pose that felt absurdly theatrical, but which she insisted was more feminine. She taught me how to walk in the heels, not with the lurching shuffle I had adopted, but with a controlled, hip-swaying gait. We spent an entire evening just walking back and forth across the living room, Sarah correcting my every step. Smaller steps. From the hip. Let your arms swing naturally. Don't stomp like a Clydesdale. Then came the makeup. She sat me down in front of her vanity mirror, the array of pots, brushes, and tubes looking like a surgeon's instrument tray. The first time she applied foundation to my face, the sensation of the cool liquid being blended into my rough skin was bizarre. It smelled floral and powdery. She covered my stubble, smoothed out my complexion, and effectively erased the face I knew. She moved on to my eyes, her touch surprisingly steady and precise, the sharp point of the eyeliner pencil tracing my lash line, the soft brush of eyeshadow on my lids, the weird spidery tickle of the mascara wand coating my lashes. I had to keep my eyes closed, surrendering completely to her artistry. When she told me to open them, the face in the mirror was a shock. My eyes looked huge, darker, and defined. They looked pretty, The thought was so alien it made my stomach twist. She finished with a deep red lipstick, carefully outlining my lips before filling them in. "A woman's mouth should be her most expressive feature," she said. More to herself than to me, but it should also know when to stay quiet. The transformation was startling. The makeup created a mask, a feminine illusion that was both compelling and deeply disturbing. It was the face of Prudence. She didn't stop there. She ordered a wig online, a modest shoulder-length brunette bob with a neat fringe. The first time she settled it on my head, tucking my own short hair underneath a wig cap, the change was complete. The person staring back at me from the mirror was a complete stranger. A woman. A tired, sad-looking woman, with a man's jaw. But a woman nonetheless. One Saturday, she came home with a small, terrifying device. It was an ear-piercing gun. "We're going to make it official," she announced. My protests were feeble and died in my throat. I sat on a kitchen chair, my heart pounding. As she marked a tiny dot on each of my earlobes with a pen, the sharp, sudden crack of the gun and the hot sting that followed was a moment of irreversible change. She put in 2 small, simple gold studs. They gleamed under the kitchen lights. It was a permanent modification, a mark of ownership. The rules of the house were formalized. David was a name that was no longer used. I was Prudence. I was to remain dressed as Prudence from the moment I woke up until I went to bed. My day was structured around housework, my lessons in deportment, and serving Sarah. My workshop tools gathered a thin layer of dust. The antique furniture I was restoring sat silent and neglected. My resistance was almost non-existent now. There was a strange comfort in the routine, in the abdication of responsibility. I no longer had to pretend to be David Talbot, the man I was supposed to be. The strain of that pretense, which I had carried for years, was gone. It was replaced by the strain of wearing high heels and a girdle, but that was a simpler, more physical burden. My inner world had become a quiet, confused place. The initial shock and humiliation had faded into a dull, constant state of being. I was Prudence. I cooked. I cleaned. I learned to walk and sit and exist in this new body. And I watched Sarah. She seemed more relaxed, more confident than I had ever seen her. She had taken my secret, a thing that could have destroyed our marriage, and had forged it into a tool to reshape our entire relationship, to reshape me. Was this what I wanted? The question was meaningless. It was what was happening. A part of me, the part that had bought the clothes in the first place, was quietly, shamefully satisfied. It was a twisted fulfillment of a fantasy I had never been brave enough to articulate even to myself. I had wanted to experience what it was like to be a woman. Now, thanks to my wife, I was getting a full immersion course. The next stage of my education, Sarah decided, had to involve the outside world. I had existed as Prudence only within the confines of our home, a private, humiliating theater, but to truly complete the transformation, I had to be seen. The thought sent a wave of pure panic through me. Being seen by Sarah was one thing. Being seen by strangers was another. In our home, I was her project, her punishment. Out there, I would be a freak, a joke, a man in a dress. "We're going to go shopping," she announced one Tuesday morning. "Prudence needs a more extensive wardrobe. That pink dress is getting rather tired, don't you think?" "I can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Sarah, please, I can't go out like this." "Of course you can," she said briskly, ignoring my plea. "You've been practicing. Your walk is much better. We'll tone down the makeup, and you'll wear flats. We don't want to draw unnecessary attention." The word flats was the only small mercy. She produced a pair of simple black ballet flats. Slipping my feet into them after weeks in the stilettos felt like stepping onto a cloud. The relief was so profound it almost made me weak at the knees, but the comfort of the shoes was overshadowed by the terror of the impending trip. She dressed me carefully, as if preparing a doll for display. A simple, navy blue A-line skirt that fell just below the knee, a cream-colored silk blouse that buttoned up to the collar. My silicone breasts gave the blouse a convincing shape. She brushed the brunette wig until it shone, and applied a more natural, daytime makeup palette. The final touch was a pair of pearl stud earrings, replacing the gold ones. "There," she said, stepping back. "You look very respectable, like a librarian." There was that word again. She handed me a purse, a simple, black leather shoulder bag. "You'll need this." The car ride was silent and agonizing. I sat in the passenger seat, my back ramrod straight, my hands clutching the purse in my lap. I stared straight ahead, terrified of catching a glimpse of my reflection in the side mirror. Every car that passed us felt like a potential threat, every driver a pair of judging eyes. We didn't go to our local mall. Instead, she drove for nearly an hour to a large outlet mall in the next state, a place where no one would know us. The sheer size of the parking lot was intimidating. "Ready?" she asked, her voice cheerful. I shook my head, unable to speak. "Come on." "Prudence," she said, her tone hardening slightly. "Don't make a scene." Getting out of the car was one of the hardest things I have ever done. The vast open space of the parking lot felt like a stage. The sun seemed blindingly bright. I was sure that every single person was staring at me, that a giant neon sign was flashing above my head, pointing me out. I walked stiffly beside Sarah, my eyes glued to the pavement in front of me, my heart hammering. But a strange thing happened. No one seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't let on. People were focused on their own shopping, their own families. A few people glanced at us, a pair of women shopping together, and then looked away. I was a tall woman, perhaps a little awkward in my movements, but I wasn't the sideshow freak I had imagined. The realization didn't make me feel better. It somehow made me feel worse. I was passing. The thought was deeply unsettling. Sarah led me from store to store. She was efficient, her choices deliberate. She bought me more skirts, more blouses, sensible cardigans. She bought me pajamas, a soft, floral print cotton set that felt achingly domestic. And then she led me to a lingerie store. Walking into a store full of lace and silk, surrounded by female shoppers and saleswomen, was a fresh wave of humiliation. Sarah, however, was completely unfazed. She confidently picked out bras that would better fit my forms, panties in sensible cotton cuts, and several pairs of stockings. At the checkout counter, the young saleswoman smiled at us. "Did you find everything you were looking for today?" "Yes, thank you," Sarah said smoothly. "My sister here needed a few new things." "Sister," the word hung in the air. The saleswoman glanced at me and gave me a polite, professional smile. I could only manage a weak, pathetic nod. She didn't blink, she just rang up our purchases. The final stop was a uniform store. I had no idea why we were there until Sarah started browsing the racks of maid and server outfits. A cold dread settled in my stomach. She selected 3. One was a classic black dress with a crisp white apron and a little frilly headpiece. The second was a pale pink version, and the third was a light lavender. "The black will be for your daily chores," she explained in a low voice, as if discussing fabric softener. "The pink and lavender will be for when we have guests." The idea of having guests, of being seen by people we knew, was a horror I hadn't even dared to contemplate. "Guests," I squeaked. "Eventually," she said, "we have to maintain appearances. After all." At the checkout, the man behind the counter was bored and tired. He scanned the uniforms without a second glance. Sarah paid, and as we were about to leave, she turned to me. "Isn't that right, Prudence?" she asked, her voice clear and loud enough for the cashier to hear. It was the first time she had used the name in public. It was a test, a final, public seal on my new identity. I felt the cashier's casual glance. To him, it was just a name. To me, It was a brand being seared into my soul. I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod again, my throat tight with unshed tears. On the drive home, I stared out the window, watching the world go by. The shopping bags rustled in the back seat, filled with the uniform of my new life. I wasn't David Talbot anymore. He had been left behind somewhere between the lingerie shop and the uniform store. I was Prudence, Sarah's sister, her maid, her creation. And the most terrifying part of it all was that for a fleeting, shameful moment, as the saleswoman had smiled at me, as the cashier had heard my new name, a tiny part of me hadn't hated it. A tiny part of me had felt a strange, quiet sense of relief. The fight was over. I had lost, and in losing, I had found a strange, terrifying new kind of peace. That night, after we got home and put away the purchases from our trip, Sarah instructed me to try on the new black maid's uniform. It was a stark, functional garment, made of a stiff, unforgiving cotton blend. The dress zipped up the back, and it was tailored to be snug. It nipped in at the waist and then flared out into a modest A-line skirt, the white apron tied tightly over it, creating a crisp, clean silhouette. The final piece was the small frilly white headpiece, which Sarah fastened into the brunette wig with a bobby pin. She had me stand in front of the full-length mirror in our bedroom. The transformation was complete and absolute. The pink day dress had a hint of girlishness to it. The librarian outfit for our shopping trip was meant to be anonymous, but this uniform, this was a statement. It defined a role, a purpose. It screamed subservience. The person in the mirror was no one I recognized. It was Prudence, the maid. The makeup Sarah had applied was still intact. My eyes dark and my lips red. The uniform was severe, almost monastic. The frilly headpiece was the final, humiliating touch, a cartoonish symbol of my new station. I saw a tall, broad-shouldered servant, a figure of quiet obedience. The man I had been the husband, the craftsman. The golfer was not even a ghost in that reflection. He was gone. I stood there for a long time, just staring. My mind, a quiet, empty landscape. The shock had given way to a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing someone else's life. That evening, I served Sarah dinner while wearing the uniform. I moved about the kitchen and dining room with a new, practiced slowness. The rustle of the starchy apron, the slight weight of the headpiece, the sensible black flats on the floor, it all felt correct. This was my new reality. Later, as I was clearing the dishes, Sarah spoke from the dining table. Her voice was softer than it had been in weeks. "David," she said. The sound of my old name was a physical shock. I hadn't heard it in so long. It felt alien. I stopped, a plate in my hand, but I didn't turn around. It's Prudence," I corrected her, my own voice a near whisper. "Look at me," she said. I slowly turned to face her. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. The hard, calculating edge was gone. In its place was something quieter, more thoughtful. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "The clothes. The hiding. I need to know the truth." I leaned against the doorframe, the plate still in my hand feeling heavy. I thought back to the beginning. The loneliness, the quiet curiosity that had bloomed in the dead of night, browsing websites on the internet. The first, trembling purchase, the thrill of transformation in the darkness of my workshop. "I don't know," I said honestly. At first, it was just a curiosity, a fantasy. It felt exciting, forbidden. I looked down at my uniform, but it became more than that. Being David, it felt like I was playing a part. Husband, neighbor, the quiet guy who fixes furniture. The roles had all these expectations I could never quite live up to. I always felt clumsy in that skin. I finally met her eyes. When I dressed, when I put on the clothes, for a little while, I didn't have to be him. I could be someone else. Someone quiet and soft. Someone with no expectations to live up to. I took a shaky breath. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just so ashamed and so scared you would leave me if you knew. I confessed everything then. The years of hiding, the fear, the shame, but also the strange comfort I found in the secret ritual. And then, I told her about the last few weeks. At first, it was hell. I admitted, my voice cracking. It was the worst humiliation I could ever imagine. But then, I saw you becoming stronger, more confident. I saw you happy in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. You were in control. And you liked it. And as much as I hated what was happening to me, I didn't hate seeing you like that. I continued to go along with it because I love you. Sarah. And I thought, if this is what it takes, if this is the price for my lies, then I'll pay it. Silence descended on the room. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Sarah just sat there, her hands folded on the table, taking it all in. I expected anger, or maybe disgust. I braced myself for the final blow. She stood up and walked over to me. She stopped, right in front of me. So close, I could see the complex emotions swirling in her eyes. She reached up and, with a startlingly gentle touch, she unpinned the frilly headpiece from my wig and set it on the table. Then, her fingers went to the nape of my neck, to the clasp of the silicone breast forms harness that I wore under the uniform. "Let's take this off," she whispered. Let's take all of it off. You can put your own clothes back on." Her offer was a key. Turning the lock on the prison I had been living in for weeks, freedom was right there. I could be David again. I could go back to my workshop, put on my old comfortable jeans and a t-shirt, and pretend none of this had ever happened. And to my own profound shock, I heard my voice say, "No." She looked at me. Confused, no. I shook my head. A slow, deliberate movement. A strange clarity was settling over me. We just bought all these new things," I said, the excuse sounding lame even to my own ears. It would be a waste. The real reason was much more complicated. The thought of going back to being David, of trying to stuff myself back into that ill-fitting skin after everything that had happened, was suddenly unbearable. The dynamic between us had been permanently altered. I didn't know how to be her husband anymore, but I was learning how to be her Prudence. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. It was the first genuine, gentle smile I had seen from her in what felt like a lifetime. The coldness was gone, replaced by a deep, startling warmth. "Okay. Prudence," she said softly, testing the name on her tongue in this new context. It no longer sounded like a punishment. It sounded like a term of endearment. She leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a passionate kiss, or a demanding one. It was a kiss of acceptance. A kiss that sealed a new contract between us. One that was not written in words, but in lace and lipstick, and the quiet understanding that had grown in the space my old identity used to occupy. Our life found a new rhythm after that night. It wasn't a punishment anymore. Not really. It was our life. Most days. I was Prudence. I wore the simple dresses and skirts Sarah had bought for me. I managed the house. I cooked the meals. I found a strange, quiet satisfaction in the domestic rituals I had once been forced into. I learned to move with a practiced grace, my walk in heels becoming steady and confident. The maid's uniform became a sort of special occasion outfit, reserved for days when Sarah had a particularly stressful day at work and wanted to come home to a house that was perfectly in order. To a partner who was devoted solely to her comfort, it was a role I slipped into, a part of our shared language. Sometimes, usually on weekends, she would let me be David again, She'd say, "I think I'd like to have my husband take me out to dinner tonight." And I would change back. Putting on my old clothes felt strange now. The rough denim and stiff cotton feeling foreign against my skin. I would look in the mirror and see David Talbot, and he looked like someone I used to know, a distant relative. Being him felt like putting on a costume. We never talked about it with anyone, to the outside world. We were still David and Sarah Talbot. But inside our home, a new truth had taken root. The power had shifted. But it was no longer a weapon she used against me. It was the foundation of our new relationship. She was my anchor, my guide, the one who held all the power, and in her control, I found a strange and profound freedom. My workshop was no longer off limits, but I found I had less interest in it. The satisfaction of restoring an old piece of furniture paled in comparison to the satisfaction of seeing Sarah's happy, relaxed smile when she came home to a perfect meal and a spotless house. Our love hadn't died in that hot attic. It had been transformed. It had become something more complex, more honest than it had ever been when I was hiding. She had taken my deepest, most shameful secret, and had not just accepted it, but had woven it into the very fabric of our lives. She learned to love Prudence, the quiet, devoted, and feminine part of me, and I learned to love the strong, confident, and dominant woman she had become. I was no longer just a husband hiding in the shadows. I was Prudence. I was hers. And in a way I could never have imagined, I was finally, truly myself.